I call this meeting to order of the Advocacy and Engagement Committee on February 2nd at 5 minutes to 7. Missed that one by 25 minutes. First, Director Yates is standing in for Director Deloach, who I believe had a work commitment tonight. So thank you, Tom, for being here. Appreciate that. And first item of business is to consider and approve the minutes from the January meeting. As Director Yates was not here, I will rely on Director Rotland to submit any concerns because I found none.
I have no concerns. I motion to approve them.
I second the motion. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, great, that's officially done. All right, so we have a long list of things to talk about, but no, as I promised you, Director Yates, there are no attachments to review. So you're in it to win it. First item, legislative advocacy. Status report. Any news?
Well, as I shared at the last board meeting, by the way, I apologize. We're on a 2-hour delay tomorrow, and we're experiencing a little challenge with our phone system right now, so sorry to be distracted there.
Wait, so there is?
Tomorrow morning. Yep.
Are we expecting ice?
Yes.
No.
Ice and fog. So we're going to try to let the city crews get the roads cleared, and then we're going to bring our kids in. So.
Like that.
What's that?
That messes with my
I'm
plans.
sorry. Should wait until you after the meeting.
Darn superintendent.
Break your button.
Weather policy. I'm sorry, I know.
Said it's the superintendent's fault. So I was just over there, as I said, with ICDA and ISEA lobbying last week on Monday. We had some great conversations with Republican members of the House Ed Committee. I'm not sure whether or not they made any difference, but at least they were listening to us. In particular, we got Representative Jorgensen corner for about 10 minutes. Robin Fields and I and a member of the West Branch EA. So I had a good conversation with them, spent a lot of time talking with them about early literacy intervention. Just so you know, we ballparked the cost for us as a district is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $300,000 to $350,000. The state's allocated 119. That was one of the challenges that we shared with them. Obviously, the rest of that has to come out of general fund, so that comes out of classrooms. So we shared some concerns like that. In particular, one of the things that we're hearing some of the legislators saying they support, and so we're working with some of our other state level advocacy groups with is this idea that if the mandates that they have passed are unfunded, that is, if they have not actually earmarked dollars for those, that they suspend their implementation if they're already currently in play, and if they're not, that they not enact any other unfunded mandates. So summer school would be an unfunded mandate, the detention and early literacy summer intervention would be an unfunded mandate. There are numerous unfunded mandates that we're carrying across the district that add up to real money. It would be a significant relief for the district if those were not required. That's not to say we wouldn't do some of the things that are in the unfunded mandates, but we might do them differently or at a lower level until such time as they're fully funded. So that may or may not have some traction.
And so, where does that idea stand? What have they done with that at this point?
I'll give you probably the strongest advocate for it. At our last legislative meeting we had here was Senator King. He serves the western part of our district, plus Clear Creek, Tipton, out there. He was very vocal about it. I quoted him at the legislative forum, the League of Women Voters. And his theory is pay or delay, which I think is a nice word to it. We've been using when we've been talking to folks in Des Moines. I've asked the UEM to compile a list of unfunded mandates. They're very familiar with that legislation that's out there. Hopefully they can get a list put together that we can use when we advocate here locally and when we're in Des Moines. So what I'd like them to do is get a list, and then how would you ballpark the cost of this in your district type of thing? So.
But no bills have been
No,
introduced.
nothing's been
anything.
introduced yet. I did ask Margaret, and I'll definitely ask her again, I'll see her tomorrow. Margaret Buckton is the lobbyist for the UEN. What would such a bill look like, or would it be, would it not be a bill, but some other type of legislative action? Because it would be in relation to bills that have already been passed, and or statutes that have been enacted by the DE. So.
When you find out,
Yep.
I mean, we just need to know who we need to
Yes.
tell people
Yep.
to.
Hopefully, as that
Contact and
as
what
that
to
issue
ask
kind of
for.
coalesces, we'll have a better idea.
Because I think that's like a number one priority,
Yeah.
because that covers all these other things. that-
Well, my theory is it impacts all districts. And so every legislator has something to gain at home if they pass something like this. There are some things that are kind of pet projects that have been passed over time that are hard to get out, but might be hard to fund. So they might be hard to have the legislation removed, but if they simply live on forever as unfunded mandates with no requirement to implement, I'm fine with that. I mean, they can sit in statutory language forever as long as it says it will not impact unless
We
funded.
can pick and choose from the smorgasbord.
Because I think some of those things might be hard for them to peel out of statute, but they'll also be hard to get a unanimity to fund them. So that would be a real success for us.
But it also gives them the message that
Yeah.
if you want this done,
Put money behind it.
we're not gonna just,
Put money behind it.
you know, we can't be expected to just swallow up
And
everything.
in a sense, from a bipartisan piece, it does support the governor's methodology of doing the teacher leadership and compensation program, because he has funded that. Now, I would argue at the expense of our classrooms, but he has funded it. So then we would know moving forward, what does that look like? As a springboard, one of the other things that we've talked about as a group of superintendents is, could we go back to the governor and say, hey, you want your 20-year SAVE extension? Here's a thought. Why don't you spend the money in the top part of that, from your perspective, the top part of that curve to pay for unfunded mandates? Or why don't you pay for transportation inequity or funding formula inequity? There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do with education, which in a sense would be categorical funding, which you would then have control over. But do
That's not
that.
what he wants, though.
It doesn't
But
touch
it makes for a
I don't
great
think
argument.
he's gonna go for that
Makes for a
one.
great argument, so.
Which brings me to the other thing with the legislative advocacy is just to find out, when last we met, about 10 days ago with our local legislators here at this table, there was a distinct feeling, especially from Senator Bolcom, that there is zero energy on either side of the aisle towards that SAVE funding.
And I would argue that it's probably not a funding argument, but a partisan argument.
Right,
that we're
I'm
dealing
sorry.
with right now. And I'll give you, for instance, we actually, you guys get that email that I sent you from PFM that Craig had done. It would be a huge plus for us when you look at this back here, because we could do all that work without a general obligation bond, plus have tens of millions of dollars left over. So that would cover us well beyond that 2023 as we plan for the future. And so that, there's a huge benefit for not just our district, but many other districts that are similarly situated, that have infrastructure needs, and that's a district like Cedar Rapids with declining enrollment. They got the same 100-year-old buildings that we do. They need the same infrastructure work on them that we do. And so I think that there's an understanding that extending that penny is hugely beneficial to districts across the state. But I don't think there's much political interest in compromising with the governor when even his Republican colleagues feel like they've been held hostage. So at the League of Women Voters meeting, Bobby Kaufman was the first to speak on it. And if I can paraphrase what he said, how can the governor possibly think that legislation like this is going to move forward if he doesn't start by talking to both caucuses prior to releasing the legislation draft language? So obviously very clear from him that the Republican caucus, at least in the House, was not brought into the conversation, and I don't believe it was in the Senate either. So I think that's the challenge behind it right now, is it's partisan, but it's partisan with the elected representatives and senators on one side and the governor on the other, as opposed to necessarily a party issue.
Okay.
So I think that's the challenge with it.
He's got no friends on that one.
And that's a good way to describe it.
Well, yeah. And I hate to be super pessimistic, but I would not underestimate the potential power of anything being used to destroy public education.
And I think that's where some folks have come down, is just looking at it, seeing it as a slippery slope.
Well, I mean, there's nothing that can't be used. We can just say, well, you know, the TLC is a fine way of looking at teacher professional development. Well, yeah, but it's costing us in all sorts of ways right now. And yet, it's statutory, and yet, it can be, they can mess with the funding anytime they want. Really, if they felt like it, well, I mean, we're screwed either way. Implementing it so far is costly, and letting it go, which, you know, you see it. I don't know.
Well, you know,
there are a lot of dangers here.
Theoretically, $150 million that ought to be going into classrooms is going into TLC next year. Okay? Now, that's not what was supposed to have happened, and the governor pledged to us that that wouldn't happen, but I would argue that's exactly what's happened. Do I think that funding would have been at 1.25% last year if $100 million wouldn't have been allocated to TLC? Absolutely not. If you think about that, that $100 million from a percentage standpoint was what, a percentage and a half? You know, we could potentially have had a 2.75%,
Yeah.
3% legislative support for the general fund through SSA, through supplemental state aid, if there wasn't the TLC in place. For a district like ours, where we were already doing elementary coaching, that's a problem. We'd already figured out a way to carve that out. Now, we have used some of our TLC money to supplant some of those costs because we were allowed to do that. But we're doing far more than we were doing pretty effectively before the TLC.
Right.
So that's, I would rather not be forced into making those kinds of choices, and I feel like that's what the legislature is making us do.
And the governor to some extent.
Yeah.
Somebody said recently, you know, he might not be the sharpest guy, but he's real good at wedges. You know.
And playing his cards right.
Well,
And he
divide and
doesn't really
conquer
care
is,
where all the wedges go.
Divide and conquer,
that's
that's
conversation.
what that's what the legislators that were here said, just as much as it's, you know, the advice from
Well, the
Senator
needs-
Bolcom was stick to your guns.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
But right here, I look at this dotted line here,
Oh, yeah.
and I go, oh,
We gotta get 60% plus one to move past the dotted
Oh.
line, and what you're
Which is
seeing
exactly what he wants you to be doing.
Sure.
that's
and-
it's
Well, and, you
it's
know.
the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Not to extend the discussion too far, but just as an FYI, I mean, if you think about it, so you've got, you know, people have, he's gotten a lot of criticism. Paul Gaussman is the superintendent in Sioux City. He's the guy that stood next to the governor at the press conference. He's taken a lot of heat from other superintendents across the state for aligning himself with the governor's plan. Look at Sioux City versus Iowa City. Property poor compared to Iowa City. Their property tax is significantly higher than ours. Well, when you've got a high property tax, 60% plus one isn't a hill, it's a mountain. And so you look at a district like Sioux City, it's got the same infrastructure problems that we do, they're growing in enrollment. Their ability to do what we're doing right now is incredibly constrained. And so for them, it's the only way out. They gotta get safe passed, and if not, they can't do any of the infrastructure work that they need to. So, you know, there are some districts that are maybe more over a barrel than we are, and I think trying to carve them out from the herd is a successful strategy. It's obviously been working.
It smells bad
So,
It does.
what else can I offer?
No, I think
for
that's
updates on
kind of
legislative?
I think that's kind of the.
Can I jump on an agenda item? The
Yeah.
UEN Day at the Capitol?
Yes.
That is February 24th.
Yep.
We're using a different tactic. It looks more like the ISEA Day at the Capitol. So, you know, I got over there, and like I said, I was talking to Jorgensen with members of the West Branch EA, the Cedar Rapids EA was there. We had some Cedar Rapids board members that attended. And so it's the same idea. We used to have a philosophy, for you guys that are new, that the UEN tried to keep consistent pressure on legislators by coming every 3 or 4 days with the 17 districts. So the idea was if you were there about every 3 or 4 weekdays, that you could stretch that out over a pretty long period of time. You could get, almost, what was it, about 2.5 months worth of consistent pressure on the legislature on an every 3-day, every 4-day kind of basis. We weren't sure that was having the effect we wanted. What we saw when we were there was we would show up with our delegation and it would be 4-H day. It would be Clean Water Day. It would be
Veterans Day.
kids should be able to go hunting at H4 Day, whatever it was. And they would bring hundreds of people there, and our voice would be very tiny. And so we decided we're not going to do that. Well, we're going to do the same thing that some of these other successful organizations, Priority One College went through. What other successful organizations do, which is bring a lot of people all at once. So our goal is to bring board members, administrators, teachers, parents, other community advocates. So we pushed it out to a fairly wide audience. It'll go out to DPO again in person next week on Wednesday, and we're working to get folks to register with Kim. We've gotten commitments from both the ICEA co-presidents to come with us right now, and we're looking for other folks to get the ability to come. And we'll start out down the street they've got an auditorium reserved for us, so we can actually start out here from Margaret, and she'll walk us through some data and some slides so that people are able to get their questions answered and get out some lobbying material. And we'll head up to the hill. By the way, there's a question asked. Don't have an answer, but the question was asked, could we customize the pink and yellow forms that are used to call legislators out of the chambers? We may not. I was able to verify that. The pink and yellow forms that they have, pink for the House, yellow for the Senate, are the only forms that you can fill out. We can get them ahead of time, so I have actually asked Margaret if she could stop by the Capitol today, and she's picking up a stack of both for me, and we'll have them for me tomorrow. So I will actually be able to bring them back and have them here in town so that people who are interested in going over, I can give them to them ahead of time. So the nice thing is a large part of that you can fill out before you get there, which means instead of standing in line trying to get one of those and fill it out, I'll be able to walk right up to the steward and hand it to them and hopefully get folks called up.
And based on the advice from Charles City at the IASB convention, if you're going to do that, make it as neat and tidy as
Yes. Yep. You want to
like a job application.
Yeah. You want to hit them with what you want. You need your 5-minute or 5-second elevator speech.
Right.
You want timely and adequate funding. Now.
Well, or 2 years ago, whichever comes first.
Cool. See, 2 things done just like that.
Can I have one more?
Yeah. Which one?
I apologize. As many of you know, I got behind on my email. I'm going to send you. I send a regular update on what's going on at the legislature. I pull material from IASB and from the UEN. I'm a couple weeks behind on it, so the first one you're going to get is going to have a lot of attachments. I send it to you, I send it to the administrators, I send it to the DPO, so some of you may have seen it before, send it to the association. So it's a reference only. Don't feel compelled to read everything, especially the first time it comes around. After that, it's usually only a couple of links, a couple of handouts on a weekly basis. I try to aggregate them instead of sending them to you whenever they come in. I'll hold them for a week and send them to you on Friday.
Okay.
Is it?
Outstanding. It's like a serial novel
It is.
of links to legislative happenings. So we got B and F done, back up to C. Class size video feedback. Lori, you've had some contacts with somebody.
I've hit a brick wall.
And
The guy so at DPO, I had asked, I said, does anybody have any contacts with filmmakers that would like to give us an in-kind donation of their time and skills? And one parent came up and talked to me, and it turns out the person that she connected me with is somebody who wants to be paid. And he apparently does very good work, and he's specialized in education, but education issues, but he wants to be paid. So that's a no. So I sent an email to PATV, heard nothing back from them.
Okay.
Okay.
So, and I've been busy with other stuff, so I haven't gotten any further than that. And I'm not really sure where to go beyond that, honestly.
Okay.
I just know I'm not good at video making, so.
Sorry, background on this for you, Tom, was Charles City had a great course at the IASB about advocacy. And they put together a YouTube video with Charles City basically saying, I am the future of Iowa, like these students saying, I am the future, whatever, and showed them in various situations saying, without funding, this swimming pool doesn't get full. Without funding, this doesn't happen. Without funding, this doesn't happen. And it wasn't Bruce Allen, it was Ron Steele, I think it was. It wasn't Bruce Allen, it was Ron Steele. It was one of them. I don't know, it was one of the, and it basically went viral. And they were able to get a spot on with, I'm pretty sure it was Ron Steele's, show or whatever on the news, and it directed a lot of attention to what happens when our legislators don't fund education.
Sure.
And so the idea was to have something along those lines and really work it from our angle, but also use it to reach out to legislators that aren't necessarily Johnson County.
Yeah, that was my goal, is
To be able to tweet
to be able to
a link.
reach other legislators, and I particularly had asked to focus on class size, because that's an issue everywhere.
Yeah.
When there's not sufficient funding.
Yep.
And I guess in my own head, the way I've sort of dealt with this at this point is I've said, we're not gonna get it done for the session, so if this could be like a long-term project that we
Yeah.
could aim, I mean, next year's gonna be the same deal, we're gonna, be up against funding issues again, so it's not going away. So I kinda thought that's something we could just work on long-term. Right now, we've got a lot of stuff going on, so.
Yeah. So we can table.
I still really think it would be good to do. The other thing, which you may wonder about, is we had asked if we could use like student video making classes, but no, this would be considered like a political message, and we can't ask students to do something that would be political.
Says who?
Becky Furlong.
From an advocacy standpoint, I think probably what she was talking about is we're not supposed to use public resources for advocacy. So it's kind of a gray area.
Any public resources?
Yeah. And what's Megan Tooker? What's she again? It's the state ethics board.
It is.
Well,
it's the longer.
and actually that's true, is that if we're running a bond campaign, we can't go out.
And this, I'm sure she's probably looking at it from that standpoint, saying this is aligned with that it's a.
Yeah,
it's a
we can't go out
political
as a district and say, vote for the bond.
I can. You can.
Excuse me.
I can say.
But Superintendent, the lady who's superintendent in Waterloo, there's a radio ad saying, when was their vote today?
Today.
It's today, yeah.
She's got an ad on that says, go out and vote for this. There's $37 million in vocational and education resources, instruction.
Maybe we should send her Megan Tooker's phone number.
It's been on KOKZ for weeks.
What I can say is I can say, if you vote for this
She's
bond, these are the
in
things
her.
we will build. If you vote for the bond, these are the things we will build. Education. You can say, vote for the bond, we need this stuff. So I know that sounds like it's splitting a hair, but that's what the ethics board does, is they come in and they say, what message am I doing? So I can do informational work about the facilities master plan. That's why we'll have to actually, when we get to the point where we're ready for a general obligation bond, we have to have a community committee. When we did the revenue purpose statement,
Right.
that was a community committee that did that. My job was to say, this is what a revenue purpose statement is, and if you vote for it, this is what we'll spend the money on. And then the advocacy group went in and say, rah, rah, vote for it. And I had to be separate from that.
If it were the student's own idea to do this, I think we're appropriately Sunbury area, the same thing with other possibilities from other areas like UAY or someplace else. I don't see how it could be argued with particularly, especially if they did it and then they posted it themselves wherever they wish to post it on their YouTube account or whatever they've got.
Yeah, if students do advocacy work on their own, and you see a lot of that going around the state, I think about the Davenport kids. The Davenport kids have done a lot of advocacy work on behalf of that differential in state funding formula.
I am worthless.
Yeah, the I am worthless stuff, that's a kid-generated thing, and as long as there's no public resources being used to support that.
Meaning like public equipment?
Public equipment,
from
sites,
school?
video equipment, yeah, stuff like that. So they could shoot it at UAY, that's fine. Their advocacy work done on behalf of the district, using district equipment is where and then just so you know, to the extent that we're being watched, I got a call from Megan, when was that, a couple months ago, that somebody saw what they considered to be a political advocacy note in the Hoover PTO flyer. The Hoover PTO flyer is compiled by and then submitted to the Hoover principal, who then prints it and sends it home to the kids. And someone took issue with a little note in there and didn't call me, didn't call the Hoover principal, called Megan Tooker at the at the ethics board. And Megan called me and said, I have it, and I need you to make sure that it does not show up in another PTO flyer. So I had to call Dennis and say, make sure that's not in another PTO flyer.
Now, what was the issue there? The fact that it was copied on
Yes,
paper?
right. It was an advocacy-oriented ad, if you will, or an announcement, and it was done on. It's compiled on school computers and printed on school copiers and printers, and so you can't do that.
That was the problem.
Yep, you can't do that. So.
It's not the delay.
So there are people watching that, so we tend to err.
Thanks, Steve, you're calling me.
Yeah, you're welcome. We tend to err on the side of caution when dealing with that, just because we know that we're kind of looking under the microscope there. So that's probably why you got that advice from Becky.
All right.
Not necessarily a good news.
So, moving on. Listening post feedback. We've had one listening post with another one coming in 2 days. Lori, I felt bad for you because you had this whole roll of numbered tickets to assign people randomly to tables, and there was like 20 people there.
And were you there before I took down all the table numbers? I had all the tables numbered, 10 tables.
I was not there for that.
And there was like one person at every table.
Yeah.
So I said, come on in, guys.
So
Yeah, so I expect we'll have more people
I think
at
you're right.
Northwest, honestly, but
so?
I don't know if we'll, I don't know if we'll have that many people. I mean, enough for 10 tables. I don't know.
we had some good takeaways from that, and I'm excited to talk that at the board table. Kim, thank you for being there. You know, if anything, and I mean, we were all there, Steve, I know you're the only one in the room that wasn't there,
Yes,
and you weren't
let's not talk
expected to be
about it.
there. But,
Everything will be a surprise.
I got an update already.
so, basically, I think everybody in the room figured out that this isn't as easy as they thought it was.
Which was largely my goal in that format of the listening post.
And I think that some useful information and takeaways came from it, and hopefully we'll have 2 to 4 useful takeaways on Thursday.
I shouldn't say largely my goal.
But
Partially my goal.
it is, I think, it's interesting how when Lori gives explicit directions about what we're there for, and people, it immediately devolves into how this affects their family individually, and then it sways to something else, and then so I think that people are surprised, and if anything, I think it helps them hear some other perspectives. I was really thankful that the teacher at the end said, "Okay, I hear what you're saying about keeping it. It can't stay the way it is, because here's what we have to deal with for the last 25 minutes of our day when the students are supposed to be out of the building. So something's got to change.
Yeah, I was glad for her as well. Who was that? Can she come back?
I don't know who it was, but it was very helpful to have her there.
But it was very helpful for people to hear that, because I think people that don't see that happening they just don't realize why it's such a big deal.
Right. So, anything that, I mean, other than the tickets, which I still think have a definite use.
Have my roll of tickets. I'm bringing it on Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was hoping there was a raffle.
There were apples.
No.
That
I mentioned the apples.
I know, and
Just saying.
they were good.
There was enough there for everybody.
See, that was what the tickets were for.
I'm sorry, Lori, go ahead.
No. I thought it was a great session. I was surprised there weren't more people there, but
Yep.
I thought it was
I was a little disappointed that we didn't necessarily, I think, reach the cross-section of individuals that we were hoping to reach by the choice of location, the discussions that we had at this very table
Yep.
about the locations. So it was nice to see 6 out of 7 board members there, though. That was good. So I think Thursday will be bigger, just the venue is a little bigger, and so far that's been my experience. That
Are we meeting in the library at Northwest?
Well, Greg Schultz had suggested that we do the library, but I don't know off the top of my head how the library is set up and if that would work very well.
If not very many people are there, it'll be fine. If a lot of people are there, it won't.
Mhm.
So I don't know.
Yeah, because there's
So-
not a lot of tables in there.
Mhm.
No
It's in
more
the
tables
cafeteria now.
cafeteria.
it's
Yep.
cafeteria.
At this,
Yep.
I think we're set for the cafeteria.
Okay.
But he had just said that he thought the library would be better, but
Well,
if we're gonna
again-
have 100 people, that's gonna be,
No, the library would be
Yeah.
bad for 100 people.
yeah, which,
If
you
there
know
were
what,
20
maybe we'll.
again, it would be really good.
I think
Yeah,
you'll have
it would be
more.
good for 20.
So,
I think
yeah, so we're
Jed-
set for the cafeteria, with the cafeteria
Mhm.
tables again.
Okay.
Yeah. We had some, just judging by past listening posts, Northwest was pretty well attended, the couple that we've done there, just because of the location.
Mhm.
So, well, good. I thought it went great. I thought you guys did a great job of running it, and I'll be there this Thursday. I think hopefully everybody else will as well. It's valuable time.
I did redo the slide with the numbers, with lots of highlighting and
Right. There's a lot of
made the
confusion.
font bigger, so
Yeah.
that it can be.
It's a little bit
understood better.
overwhelming, but big neon arrows pointing, yeah, I get it. Okay. So yeah, the point that was on the agenda was just to say, hey, this is gonna be a meeting in between the 2 listing posts. Let's just talk between 1 and 2, what could be improved, and it sounds like you've already made the improvements. And get more people there. Right.
Yeah, I don't know what to do. I mean, there's nothing new here. You get people in a group and they immediately start talking about their own situation and they want to say what it is that affects them, and that is their story. The interesting thing about that table I was at was that they really didn't agree on much of anything, which kind of was good.
Is that back table?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I re-steered them a couple times away from talking about the length of the school days. No, we can't talk about that. I mean, there's some relevant aspects to it which get away, even from what we're there to do, which is discuss kind of the pros and cons of the recommendations and
Mhm.
stuff. But it's not irrelevant to tell them about money. It's not irrelevant for the teacher to say, look, this ain't working. So there's some things that could be on the threshold of tangential that probably aren't. I think it's good for people to know. And I don't know that I would deliberately take people away from their personal stories unless it went on for 25 minutes before we got around to talking about it.
Well, yeah, some of them do. Some of them, some of them like to focus on their child's swim lessons. And
Well, yeah,
okay.
there was a lot of that. But, I guess, part of it depends on if that many of us are there and we can divide up what's our role. I mean, on the one hand, it's a listening post. Are we going to provide some direction for how this should go once we get in there?
Well, what I have done with the task force and what I did at the listening post as well is there was one parent that was getting off topic and going on, and I just kind of caught a spot and I said, now what do you think, to the next person next to her who hadn't said anything.
Right.
So
You had like 3 specific tasks, right? Was it 2 or 3 specific tasks that
Chris
you said?
was the one that came up with those, and the first question was, should secondary or elementary be first?
Right.
What do you think? The second question was, what are the ideal times?
Right.
Or do you agree with the ideal times? And then the third question was essentially, what times do you want?
I think the only suggestion I might have is to say, all right, to all the tables, talk about the first question, go. And then time's up, talk about the second question, go. Time's up, talk about the third question, go. Time's up now. Let's report back.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they just start about.
Yeah.
What I did at this last one is about 10 minutes prior to the end of the discussion, I went around and told everybody, if you haven't talked about the last one yet, you should.
Exactly.
We're going to be reporting out in 10 minutes.
So if you're only on number 1.
Yeah.
So it might not be bad to have somebody just kind of,
Yeah.
okay, it's time to finish up the first question, moving on to the second.
Shouldn't be a problem.
No, just gentle guidance.
And I think that's something we can do as board members is
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
help facilitate that.
Somebody just asked me, is this going to change? And I said, yes. You could say you'd like for it to stay the same, but frankly, I can tell you, it's going to change.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an accurate statement, and shut down part of the conversation, which I didn't see any problem with having anything.
So, okay, looking forward to it on Thursday. I got it penciled in, penned in. Op-ed pieces. This was something that I asked to add just so we could talk it. The previous board, it seemed like Chris and I, mostly Chris, mostly Chris would, write guest editorials with the local newspaper. I wrote 2 or 3, maybe once every 6 months or so. One of our other board colleagues from the previous board was prone to kind of just throwing one out there. And I guess that it seems like there's a little more energy. Maybe it seemed to me that there was some more energy from this board to engage in that type of advocacy, and I think it's a good thing. I know that Chris has written at least one, or he wrote one at New Year's, what are we looking at in the new year? I know that Director Deloach had written one in December. I'm not sure if Chris Liebig has written one. I'm not sure if he has. Have either of you written one
I have not, but I've sort of,
Came on, no?
I have sort of an outline for the bell schedule. When we have a decision made.
Right.
I think then would be the time at which I would sum it up and submit that.
So I guess the idea that, and we couldn't we almost started talking this at the last meeting, but we couldn't. So I asked that we put this on here. Number one, if there's more interest, and I'm not saying that every board member has to, it would be nice to have some type of a coordinated effort so that the press citizen isn't suddenly getting 3 or 4 pieces in the same month, where it might be better to have, on a periodic basis. Do we want it monthly? Do we want it twice monthly? Because I think it's good. I think it's good that there's a lot of, well, the board's doing this, but it would be nice to have our summary of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Like Chris's, what's coming up in the new year, here's why the bell schedule decision is made and what that means to you. We have a lot of confusion right now, apparently, as far as what happens to 6th graders matriculating into 7th grade next year.
We have a little confusion, that's for sure.
At least in some areas. So, but that's a whole other story. So I think it would be valuable. And I guess the other reason I wanted to talk it is because there's kind of 2 maybe unwritten, but well, one of them is written, but 2 suggestions. And one is to just say, if we do have a schedule and you're going to do one, just send an advanced copy out to the board and say, I've submitted this here. So that opening up the newspaper, the rest of the 6 members of the team don't look at it and go, oh, okay, what's this about?
It's already happened.
It has happened.
It has.
It has
and
happened.
that's why we asked to have it on the agenda, because it is, depending on what's written,
Because, I mean,
we need some time to,
I'll get text messages. Have you looked at the paper this morning?
Yep.
What's in the paper this morning?
So am I.
And the second one is that, and usually there's a byline that says, so and so is a member of the Iowa City School Board. The opinions reflected here are of that, maybe of that individual, and not necessarily reflective of the board as an entity, or something along those lines. And so there's the 3 reasons I wanted it was, number 1, should we have a schedule? If so, how often? And who do you think might like to partake in it? Number 2, can we, as a board, agree that advance notice would be nice? And if not, then I'm sorry I brought it up. And number 3, can we at least have a byline? Agree to have a byline.
It says that.
Something to that effect.
That was standard procedure.
Yeah,
It's a
not.
newspaper procedure, it's not necessarily ours.
Oh,
It wasn't in one recent instance.
Oh, yeah, no,
But I know Phil's written some as well. Director Hemingway's written some as well. And it's like, I feel like more of a sense of people willing to do it
yeah.
and wanting to do it.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing.
Well, you
I want to encourage it.
Yeah.
it would be really good for somebody to do one right now on discretionary busing. Because there's a lot of questions about that, and the newspaper coverage, it tells it one way, but there's so many things that they don't cover that it would be great if somebody would do one. I'm not putting myself out there because I'm already going to do one for bell schedule, but
Maybe I will, because it affected my family directly.
Okay.
that would be great for you to do that, and I think people might take it better
Yep.
for you to say, this was something I lost as well, and this is how, whatever. So I
People
think
be
that
mad
when
at
we
me,
have
but-
big things going on, that we should do something. I don't know about a schedule so much, because
Okay.
some people might not want to do it or feel comfortable. I know that one of the board members doesn't want necessarily to feel like the board is informed or part of whether an article is done or not.
Oh,
So
okay.
I think that's another reason this was on the agenda. So,
Yeah.
so I don't know if that's just kind of a board agreement that we want to have, and then people can follow it or not follow it, but I personally agree that that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
I would prefer my colleagues or my fellow board members inform me ahead of time. And I don't expect everybody to have to agree on everything, but it'd be nice
Just so you know.
to know.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree with
Instead of
that.
reading it on Facebook or getting the text or
Sure.
whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would, again, I think we need to make it clear that I think it's a good thing, because same with listening posts. Like I said before, 6 out of 7 people at the listening post is really good, because previous iteration of the board, there was some flat out, I don't want to go because I don't feel they're useful. And that was very disappointing, because if one of the things that we learned from the Leadership for Student Learning is you have to involve the public if you want anything to have any value. It's part of the process. So whether or not you agree with it or not,
Right, well,
it's part of the job.
That was a board member that felt that way?
Yeah.
yeah. You know, and I would say the same thing I would say about students who didn't want to study one particular thing. It's not about you.
Right.
It's not. Listening to posts aren't about us.
I don't want to study Elizabethan folk.
Oh, I could tell you stories.
I don't want to study
One of my
calculus.
favorite stories actually was rooted in a dilemma in U.S. Lit Honors and got resolved in Bruce Wilson's chemistry class.
Oh, perfect.
You know, I don't know. Yeah, that's fine. But I don't have a problem writing, and you shouldn't either, given the quality of your training when you were a young man.
With the exception of AP English in the 12th
I'm
grade.
sorry, that was exactly my point, and now we're being recorded while we're going to have this little contretemps. Just because you were in the 7th hour.
My brother has dropped one class in this one.
Your brother.
Stop. That's not on the agenda. All right. So, okay. So what do we take back? We say we say that it should be encouraged, and that we discussed should there be a schedule, and we decided the schedule isn't necessary, but that the energy is a good thing, and that.
And especially when we have something big that's just happened.
Yep.
That would be a good time.
Summary statements, just like we're doing one-pagers for big decisions to be reflected in board docs. Okay. Summary statements, and and as a kind of board norm, inform the board, and hopefully there's a byline
Yeah.
that goes along with it.
Shoot, just put it in there right in front.
Well, yeah.
Or at the end, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Either one, just.
I'll quit beat.
There's nothing wrong with having that guideline and informing the other board members about it. How you do it, is.
I'll quit beating the dead horse.
Yeah.
Thought exchange. The reason this is on there is because the board asked us to look into, to prioritize ideas to utilize after we get the preliminary weather report, which is kind of being held up because of spring break, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the big challenge with it is you do the first piece, then they do the moderating piece, then they do the second piece. Our initial plan was to have started something like this in the fall, regardless of what tool it was we were looking at, so that you could start that piece shortly in the fall. Allows you to do that initial engagement, kind of helps teach people how to use the tool. Then we move into the next one, because we were looking for something that helps us generate dialogue with the community and support as we start getting ready to gear up for the bond. We're behind that loop a little bit, and so one of the concerns that we had when we shared with them, okay, we're ready to go, after the board adopted it, was they said, okay, time out, what constraints are there on your schedule? Because the longer the gap in between the two pieces, the more likelihood is that people fall away from the process. And so they said, we'd like to keep that timeline, do this, moderate it as quickly as we can, and then come back to it. So spring break sits in there, and their recommendation was, well, let's use that time frame for moderation, so we can do the 2 engagement pieces on either side of it, because otherwise you might wind up doing this earlier and then having a gap while they're doing the moderation, which leads into spring break, and then having to wait till after spring break to do the follow-up piece too. So they were just concerned about having a large gap in there. So as I shared to Brian, we could start it earlier, but that would just leave a longer gap between the first 2 pieces.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, that because of the timeline that we made a decision, is that prevented them from starting it before winter break.
Yeah.
Right. Because we could have had the first part done.
Sure.
And then come back. Okay. So, all right. But I guess really the main reason that this was.
And if I could just add too, I think that to the extent possible, if we can look at what I think will be some pretty significant needs for community engagement after we're done with bell schedule and attendance zone, to start gearing up for conversation about the general obligation bond. I know the fall 17 feels like a long way away, but it is literally right around the corner, and we're going to want to be ready to go. We're going to want to spend the summer. My hope is that get a bell schedule resolved and get the attendance zones for Grant and American Legion Road Hoover resolved by the end of the school year, so we can spend summer doing planning and gear up work for the general obligation bond campaign, which will include finding some community co-chairs for it and starting to develop a community committee behind it. And then we kind of run in parallel with the information and engagement that we can do as a district, and then the advocacy and engagement that the board or that the bond committee can do. And we're going to want those 2 to come out, if not running, at least moving pretty quick after the beginning of the new school year. So, as I think your initial question was kind of what next topics to put on there, and my suggestion would be that we think really strongly about how we can leverage conversation with the community about the bond. So that's my 2 cents
Right.
on that. Just because I'm a little nervous about the timeline personally.
Well, I think.
No, there's good reason for it.
I think that, in discussing with other districts that have utilized this tool as part of, especially as laying the groundwork to passing large bond issues, one superintendent shared with me, this was somebody out in the Seattle area, shared with me that they had some rough ideas about what direction they wanted to go with phrasing the bond campaign. And after doing thought exchange, they completely changed their direction, and that in a way that resonated significantly with the voters. They thought that what they thought was important turned out to be really not the thing that resonated with the voters. And so I do think that by fall, by fall, we pretty much need to have bond ideas it's going to be about a 1 year.
So is it not just what we already have?
It is, but the only caveat I would say to that is that we've changed it once since the original Facility Master Planning Steering Committee came into play. And there have been questions that the community has raised about order of projects in there. And we haven't gone back and looked at that in substantial detail since the committee's initial work in 2013. So I think there is an opportunity, as Brian said, just like some of these other districts have done, as we've looked at the case studies that they've done, I think there's an opportunity to make sure that people understand what the projects are, what the order is that they are in the plan, and perhaps propose alternatives and give them the opportunity to weigh in on those. I'd say that the way that I've seen it in some of the case studies that you look at is they've proposed, here's a couple of theoretical constructs for you to look at now. Let's build a Venn diagram out of it. How many people just like this stuff over here, just like this stuff over here? What shows up with both people liking it in the middle type of thing? Now you've got some real common ground where you've got an enormous percentage of the population that supports these things in the middle, which might mean that Project X moves to the bottom or gets revised or, so I just share that
Right.
idea with you. We've
Well-
shared this with BLDD, who helped us build this, and they said if that's the direction we want to go, that is definitely something that they can help us with.
I just remember in particular the instance I'm thinking of had something to do with renovation of a stadium. Had something to do with renovation of a stadium as part of a big district-wide renovation thing, and there were some really vocal people screaming about like let's say Batesfield. You've got to make, or in Cedar Rapids, more like a Kingston Stadium thing. It was a local stadium that all the high schools use. It's like you've got to make sure Kingston Stadium is in there. It has to be in there. And when they used thought exchange, turned out that wasn't even on most people's radar, and so they dropped it. They said, "We're not doing anything to the stadium," and the thing passed. And 2 previous attempts had not. But they were able to say, okay, the loud people are screaming for the athletic booster club, screaming for the stadium, but that doesn't represent the 60% supermajority.
The only thing that still concerns me is the turnaround time. If we're gonna ask long distance questions, then we can keep collecting interim data, but if the turnaround time is always gonna be at least 30 days, hell, nobody's gonna remember what the question was anyway. You're gonna ask a long distance one, you wanna keep asking questions, partial questions about, the bond of 2017, sure. So if you're gonna get what you need to get back, or what we need to get back every 30, 45 days, however often we ask the questions, but honestly, you can't, with that kind of turnaround time, it doesn't get faster. I mean, I know after the initial one, which, the setup could take, well, I get that. Although I'm still horrified by the length of time, but,
Well, I'd say we use different kinds of tools for different communication. I mean, if you look at how we broadcast media out, we will use everything from Twitter to Facebook to text messaging to phone calls. I mean, we use a lot of different broadcast medium because they do different things for us. The communicator does something different for us than Twitter does. When I first came to the district, we used surveys ad nauseum constantly. We developed enormous survey fatigue within our community as a whole. Our response rates were abysmal, and so we brought in somebody from outside. We did a survey of surveys. We found the thousands of surveys that were being sent out to parents and staff members and community members, and we said, no, now if you want to do a survey, you've got to come to the central office to do a survey. I mean, there's still classroom surveys and things like that that go out, but for the most part, surveys are controlled with the idea that we only do one a month. And when we do one a month, it's not one a month to parents. It's we do one a month. This month might be a staff survey. Next month might be a student survey. The month after that might be one that goes to the parents or the community. So if you're a parent or a community member, you're only being surveyed periodically throughout the school year because that increases your interest and your stamina to participate. We've seen our response rates go up dramatically. I look at our culture and climate survey. We've got almost half of our staff participating in it. If you know anything about survey research, that's awesome. That we get 50% of the folks that work in the district to fill that out. And so, to that end, I think we're looking at different ways to engage with the community. So we'll do listening posts. That's one way we're going to gather input. We're going to do surveys. That's another way to gather input. We're going to use this, which is, I know they hate it when I describe it this way, but I always think about it as kind of an online affinity process. That takes longer, and so that's just inherently part of that process. And so, we want to use those different ways to probe the community to try to get more and deeper feedback from them. I wouldn't argue that you ought to go out and do 55 listening posts to try to get more input, because I think you're just going to hear from the same people 55 times. So, okay, maybe there's 5 listening posts and 1 survey and 1 thought exchange and other methodologies out there to gather that input. So I look at it as a kind of a multi-pronged approach to community engagement. So that's kind of the approach that we took when we started looking for other alternatives besides what we're doing.
And I'm sorry, back to timeline wise, we're not likely to get this done in time to do anything on attendance zones, or are we to do any type of a solicitation on attendance?
No, and I think if we would have wanted to do attendance zones, we would have done that earlier in the process. I think we're pretty far along in that in terms of gearing up for the conversation.
Okay.
I think if you want to gather
It's
that
really
input
big.
ahead of time.
Big test after the weather report is to put it right to bond mode then.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, what we're doing is we're looking at gathering community input for a decision we want to make in September of 17.
Yeah.
So we start that process in the fall of 16.
Right, but
And I think part of that is to be measured and deliberate in gathering information.
other thing was beyond that, because I mean, that's one thing we can use it for. Other ideas,
I think another thing would be just how we're spending our money. I mean, we have to be kind of careful about how we ask that, but you know, like the discretionary busing discussion, that would have been a great thing to have for thought exchange. Like, okay, so we have these people that are getting this, but then we could use this money instead for this many teachers that would benefit all these other students. You know, it'd just be a great discussion, I think, for people to see other people's perspectives and, you know.
That's a great idea, because we actually started an exercise with that with the administrative council, and I used it with another community group, which really comes down to kind of a core values kind of discussion about where you want to weight your priorities. And we looked at it in the context of what have we cut or reduced already in the budget. We didn't go back a long way. We went back for the last 5 years. I asked all the administrators to do some brainstorming, and we've got a lot of history and the admin council in there together. And so we have kind of a list of those things that have been reduced or eliminated. And I asked Craig and Leslie, and they went through and put some dollar values to those, so you can see them, so it gives you context. And then we said, what are all the things that we do that are important for our kids? And we came up with about 272 things on that list. There were some things that had some overlap to it. We pared it down to about 180. And then we were doing a forced choice exercise with the administrators that said, you get 10 ones and 10 twos. Tell us your 10 ones and tell us your 10 twos, and then we can go through and across that broader body, take a look at it and say, what do people value on our administrative team? Well, I think it'd be wonderful to be able to go out and do that with a broader cross spectrum of the community, ask them what's important, which might be bigger than that list of 180 that they see as building leaders. And then, of that vast universe, which ones are the most important? I think that'd be a fantastic exercise. If the state keeps shorting us, we're going to continue to be challenged.
Exactly.
And
And to help people understand that and understand that there's choices, and for them to have a piece in that decision-making, I think, is key to building the morale along with the bond, you know, to feel like they've been a part of it, and they trust us, and we're following what they want, and we know what they want. And
they get to see the at what cost discussions that you guys have to face all the time
Yeah.
when you're balancing.
right?
So we can put some of that in the hopper, bring back some thoughts for you.
so I think that would be a good
That'd be
thing to
nice.
do actually before
Before the
bond, because I
Do
think
that
it
in
would
the
be a
fall.
confidence building, a morale building sort of thing.
Do that in the fall, and then we know what some of those core values are that will arise naturally from that, and then.
Right, and
And
we can
the
start
bond
building
piece.
that trust that I think we need to
I like
be
that
able to
timing.
pass the bond.
I like that time.
Good.
There's an idea right there.
What time's the listing post?
6.
Oops.
All right. So, agenda setting for next meeting. That's not cool. No, I just have to beat it into submission. Obviously, we'll keep up on legislative advocacy. We'll be wrapping up after our trip on February 24th, so we'll want to come back and recircle, and I'm anticipating zero movement on on anything there, but also, what's that?
That's not optimistic.
Or delusional either. We'll punt on class size video for a while, but it might be a recurrent theme for some of you folks that have 4 years ahead of you. Listening post feedback, I guess we can circle back to that, although my guess is by that time we'll probably have some type of a Bell decision, but perhaps just learnings from the second listening post and see if there's any takeaways to incorporate in our listening posts as we go into attendance zones.
And planning for when those are gonna be.
Right.
And where.
So, yeah. And we still don't have that kind of central repository of informal opportunities, so I don't know what to do about that, but that's okay.
Well, there's some PTO things that are going on.
Right.
Alexander and Kirkwood both
That's
have
right.
asked
That's
different
right.
board members.
Yeah.
So some of those things are just sort of happening naturally, you
Yeah.
know?
We do have to, if more, I think Chris is probably, I know he asked for board members to reply back to him, but we'll have to list that as a public meeting if more than 4 board members attend a PTO meeting.
If 4 or more.
I
right?
believe
Yeah.
so.
4 or more.
So. And then the op-ed pieces, I think that we'll just let that happen. We'll report back to the board on that. That's all I got. Is there anything else you guys can think of for A&E? We should be in the thick of it with the legislative session. My guess is that'll be the hot topic. Okay. All right, good. So, Tom, thank you for being here. If anybody, I give you as guest A&E the option to move to adjourn.
I so move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Amen. Hallelujah. I'm just reading the love letter I got.